Take a moment to read Unit 7, Problem 11.2, Finding a Job. During this problem, students are beginning to understand the relationship between sample size and margin of error. As Elena and Claire collect samples and notice they have different margins of error, students should begin to connect that the larger sample sizes have lesser margins of error. Sample size is the number of individuals or things included in a study. Margin of error is a measure that tells us how much the results of a survey or experiment may vary. It is like a safety net that accounts for uncertainty in data. It gives us a range of values within which the true value will most likely fall. When we see margin of error, we should consider that the actual results could be slightly higher or lower than what we observed. Standard deviation is half of the margin of error. The first question asks us to find both students, standard deviation, and mean. So let's first look at Elena. Elena has a mean of 0.70. She has a margin of error of 0.280. So we're going to take that and divide by 2 to find our standard deviation. Claire has a mean of 0.74. To find her standard deviation, we're going to take her margin of error, 0.138, and divide by 2. And we get 0.069. Let's go on to question number 2. For part A, it gives us 2 statements. Elena says, my simulation used 0.7 as the proportion since I found that proportion in my original sample. Claire says, my simulation used 0.75 as the proportion since I found that the proportion in my original sample. The students use different proportions in their simulation. Do you think this is why Claire has a smaller margin of error? No. So different populations would change the mean. But they wouldn't change the margin of error very much. The only thing that would change a margin of error would be increasing or decreasing the sample size. Let's go on to part B. They start to look at more of the differences in their initial sample, and Elena says that she used 10 people in her initial sample, and Claire surveyed 40 people. So now we can see the difference in their sample size. Elena has a much smaller sample size than Claire's larger sample size of 40. This is why Claire has a smaller margin of error. The bigger the sample size, the more of the population you see. You see more of this population variability, and therefore your margin of error is smaller.